Welcome to Sid Caudle, Christian People's Alliance. Sid, I've got to ask you, with all that's going on at the moment, and it's bad news from everywhere, it seems, not just the Trump-Putin thing. The nation seems down at the moment, and maybe that's a good thing. They're still before the storm, but I would think a party like yours could really take advantage of the situation. Certainly reform is, but I mean, it's difficult, Sid. You've got this title that is quite right, Christian People's Alliance, but sometimes the way the state of the country is, if it was called Atheist People's Alliance, you might get more votes.
Well, I don't think it's the name that's the problem. I think the problem is we're just not getting publicity. And we're trying very hard. I mean, I was speaking yesterday to a church leader who was actually asked by GB News to be their religious correspondent, but then everything collapsed. And he was going to bring me in. And, it's like, I'm going to be the religious correspondent. I'll bring you in. I want you on the program. And then it's like, oh, everything's collapsed. It's no longer going ahead. And this is typical. I mean, we've had it four or five times now, that we've been on the verge of getting onto programs, and it's like, oh no, sorry, we're not going ahead. And what it is, I don't know, whether it's spiritual, whether it's Ofcom in the background that's causing problems. But while we're getting absolutely nothing whatsoever on the media, I mean, our only coverage is on social media, which we're making for ourselves. And we're not getting any coverage at all on BBC, Sky News, GB News, any news at all. We're getting a little bit of coverage on Revelation TV, but even that's not very much. But for the average man in the street, they're just hearing nothing about Christian People's Alliance. And while that continues, obviously it's very hard for us to make progress and get lots of votes. And it's also very hard for us to get a lot of money because Reform have got a lot of money because they've had a lot of publicity, and they've had phenomenal amounts of publicity. I mean, including Nigel Farage having his own slot on GB News, and they're talked about all the time on GB News. They talk reform, reform, reform almost incessantly. And that's given them the fantastic breakthrough in the last local elections, where they're now running 10 councils. And they're continuing to make breakthroughs in council by-elections all over the country. I mean, they've got candidates lined up for every seat. They've got candidates lined up for all local government seats, and and they're doing brilliantly. But it's all come from publicity, and that's what we need.
If you were in the States, Sid, would it make any difference?
Well, no, I don't think you would in the States, because in the States they've got a very strong two-party system. I mean, the difference would be, I suppose, that we could be standing for the Republican Party, and the fact that they have primaries, where they choose their candidates in primaries, means that our people could be standing in primaries and we could be supporting them, and they could maybe making progress, to becoming Republican candidates. That's the difference maybe in the States. You couldn't have a Christian People's Alliance in the United States. I mean, third parties like the Libertarian Party and the Green Party have just made no progress at all in the system. I mean, they have a very strong two-party system in the United States. It's different, of course, in countries like France or in Israel or in Italy. I mean, in those countries, because they have proportional representation, all you need is a threshold of about 2.5% of the vote, and you can get people elected. And new parties can very quickly make rapid progress because of the proportional representation system. So, in that system, obviously, we could be thriving, but it's very difficult to thrive in the British system. It's the same in Canada, by the way. It's very hard for third parties in Canada to make progress because they have the same political system as us.
Interesting. Sid, we've got to move on, of course. The topic of the day is friend Putin and Trump, and clearly they are friends from the body language. Fascinating stuff there. The European leaders are muscling in, some people say, especially Sir Keir. Spends more time abroad than at home. Can't blame him for that, actually. If you think it's his status with people at home. Now, saying that, is it going to be messy? I think it is.
Well, what's happening is, well, first of all, we need to be clear that Putin is a very nasty dictator. What Trump is trying to do is to bring about peace and to bring about some sort of peace deal. And he wants his legacy to be winning the Nobel Peace Prize and bringing peace to conflicts all over the world. And he has been successful between Cambodia and Thailand. I mean, he's had a tremendous peace agreement there, and fighting stopped. He's obviously trying very hard in the Middle East with Gaza, although because Hamas has just reneged on the ceasefire agreement there, um, they're still back at square one. But Hamas is now saying that they want to negotiate again. So who knows? I mean, he's trying to bring about peace there, but his biggest prize is undoubtedly trying to bring peace between Russia and Ukraine. Um, it's I think you said, well, before Trump came on the scene, no one was talking to Putin. I mean, Biden never talked to Putin at all, other than on the phone. I mean, he never had any meetings with him, and other than maybe in passing at some summit. But I mean, he had no one-to-one meetings with Putin at all. And no European leader was talking to Putin. I mean, he was deliberately boycotted. He was just treated deliberately as a pariah on the world stage, not somebody we're willing to talk to. Now, obviously, if you take that approach, you're not going to get a peace agreement. And it's only Trump who's come in and said, I'm going to talk to Putin, I'm going to get a peace agreement. And because he's taken that approach, suddenly now the Europeans are all muscling in. But basically, what they're saying, including Starmer, is, we don't want you to make an agreement with Putin that is in any way detrimental to the Ukraine. That's what they're basically saying. Now, whether Trump is going to be able to make a peace agreement that is acceptable to Ukraine, I don't know. I mean, he's basically saying there's no way that Ukraine can get Crimea back. I think he's looking at some security guarantees that may well be acceptable to Russia that are short of Ukraine joining NATO. I think that's almost agreed. I think the problem is the territory. But I think Trump is going to be saying to Zelensky, you're going to have to give up the Donbass, you're going to have to give up Donetsk and Luhansk. But you see, the problem is Russia only occupies 70% of Donetsk now. So if Ukraine's having to give up the other 30% of Donetsk that are currently Russia doesn't occupy, but that may be in exchange for Russia giving up Zaporizhzhia and Kherson, which they occupy large parts of that. They don't occupy the capital cities. They don't occupy Zaporizhzhia itself or Kherson itself. So I don't know. But you see, the thing is, in the background, Putin wants the whole of Ukraine. I mean, he wanted Odessa, and he was very disappointed that he didn't actually manage to get his forces, into Odessa. He wanted to take the whole coastland of the Black Sea that Ukraine has away from them. That's what he wanted to do, but he's failed. He's obviously failed in that objective. But now, whether he's going to say, yeah, okay, I want to end the war, this deal you're offering me will be at least saving face, and we can live to fight another day. Whether he's going to accept that, I honestly don't know. Maybe he will accept that. But the prize for Trump undoubtedly is peace. And if Trump manages to get peace, he doesn't really care about where the border is.
No. The sad fact is, in all this, the people are suffering from both sides,
Yeah.
the troops especially, and the innocent, as the collateral damage, it's blithely called, but real people. Now, in all this, you've got the Donbass.
Mm.
Allegedly, they would like to be Russian because they are closest to the border and they would vote for Russia. So you think, oh, well, self-determination and all that. Can we put that into the factoring of all this? And then one looks at what Putin really wants, which is the mineral-rich areas. Those certainly are up for grabs to make batteries, etc. And is he going to be happy with that? Like you said, I'm sure he wanted Odessa. Forget that. They've not got much coastline left as it is. Russia have occupied most of it to the Black Sea. But in all this and underwriting all this, there's a real problem. If you look at world wars and local, let's call them wars over the century, the preceding century, they've all finished up messy. In other words, it's not been, well, you invaded this country, clear off, we've taken it now. And it's not been as simple as that. Deals have been done, and eventually things have worked themselves out or have not worked themselves out. And my suspicion is it will be messy because nobody wants to lose their permission. Zelensky as the big cheese in Ukraine, Putin, of course, and Trump. So they got to preserve their own standing, if you like. So it's difficult and it will be messy. We'll know a bit more at the end of today, I think.
Well, yes, you see, it's interesting. So you mentioned self-determination there, which you see, in my view, self-determination should be the key thing in any situation. And I know Russia have had these votes. They've had a vote in Crimea, and they said more than 90% of the people of Crimea want to be part of of Russia. But they weren't free and fair ballots at all. I mean, they were just loaded ballots. They were Russian ballots where Putin gets 90% of the vote all the time because it's all, all the ballots are rigged. And that's what those ballots were. The ballot in Crimea was like that. The ballots in the Donbass were like that. But what we should have is a free and fair election. Now, I mean, but I presume Putin's not going to agree to that. But you see, I think a parallel to me is probably East Germany because, after the war, Germany was divided up. You had two-thirds of it, or maybe three-quarters of it, that went to the Western sphere and became West Germany. And you had the other third or quarter, however much it was, that became East Germany. But the thing is, East Germany was, look, by force added to the Warsaw Pact bloc. I mean, the people of East Germany never had any vote or had any say. And ultimately, it didn't work. Ultimately, East Germany came back to be part of Germany again because that's what the people wanted. And I think it could well be a situation where even if the Donbass and Crimea are given to Russia now, ultimately it must come down to what the people want. And if the people really want to be part of Ukraine, if that's what they really want, then I think ultimately they will have to have the right to be in the country that they want to be in. You can't force people permanently to be part of a country they don't want to be in. That's my view.
Yes, and as I say, hopefully we'll know a little bit more in the fullness of today. Let's move on to the mercurial Elon Musk. He can be loved or he can be hated, but certainly you can't accuse him of not breaking the mold. And I think he's done some very, very good things. He's not been, or he hasn't had the trumpets blown in his favor regarding that. But I'll tell you one thing, he's about to form another energy company in the United Kingdom, but it's going to be different, which is good. It's competition. And there again, he's going to break the mold because he's going to offer far more ability for each householder holder to sell back electricity. And this time it's through providing them with batteries for storage, obviously. And this is a perennial problem. It's all right when the wind blows, but you've got a storage for when the wind doesn't blow. Saves you opening a coal-fired power station in the extreme. But he's coming along there, and that's great. Let me tell you another thing that's happened because the UK suffer from the most outrageous, oh, do we know, broadband compared with other countries. It's awful. It still is awful. When I speak to people all over the world, and I've got no fears about speaking to India, believe it or not, even China, America, you can name the country. I don't panic before my interview. I do when I'm speaking to lots of England. You're okay, you're near the centre, London, so we don't have many problems. But in most parts, it's awful, and that's because of monopoly and the BT monopoly. And they've been lying about this. Oh, we've got nothing to do with OpenReach. Of course you have. You're one of the same company. And it's still like that. You can't get things done. So what has Mr. Musk done? Well, he's got what they call Starlink, and this is very apposite for down here in Southern Europe as well, because it's a big country, much bigger than the UK. And there are rural areas, particular, that do suffer. And you can't blame the average telephone company for not running miles and miles of cables for 3 homes. But now he's put a special satellite, and for a change, it faces north. So if you've got a clear view of north, then you can get one of these, and it's not expensive. It's about £35 a month, and you get guaranteed 200 up and 200 down, which is a darn sight more than the average. But certainly ADSL line, but even fibre optic line in Britain. So well done him, and that's available in Britain. And we are going to use that as a backup here because of the rat problem. The old joke, of course, is that I thought Franco had them banned. No, they're big uns and they chew fibre optic cables. They love the taste, and we're always getting cut off. So
Mm,
that's
mm.
our fallback. So, which is important to us. But you see, it's the curse of the monopoly again, isn't it, Sid?
This is interesting. I mean, you've got to give it to Musk. I mean, he is brilliant at innovation and new ideas, and not only having ideas, but putting those ideas into practice. So they actually work. I mean, what he pioneered in Tesla was phenomenal. But I have to admit, I mean, I thought that once electric cars became fashionable and being promoted by governments, that Tesla would disappear because I thought all these big companies like Ford and Vauxhall and Toyota and Nissan and all these massive Honda, all these massive companies, car companies all over the world, once they turn their production towards electric cars, then an electric car company is just going to fade away. But it's not happened. I mean, probably because of the quality of Tesla. I know Tesla suffered a little bit with, you know, with Trump, with Musk's involvement in politics, but I think it's only just a temporary thing. I think he'll soon, well, he's a lot less involved in politics now than he was, and he's given up his Department of Government Efficiency to others and has pulled out of that. I mean, he's obviously still owns X, which is, I think, his ownership of X to me has been fantastic because, previously we were shadow banned on X, and we're not shadow banned anymore. We've had to start a new site, but nevertheless, the new site that we've started isn't banned, and we are getting a lot more reach on X now than we had before. So so that's been good for us, if you like, and it's been good. I think it's been good for everyone because previously the New Age liberals were actually controlling social media. I mean, they were controlling Facebook, they were controlling the previous Twitter, and they were controlling just about any social media. So if you put stuff on social media they didn't like, it was banned or shadow banned. But that's not happening now. But what this government's trying to do, of course, is to introduce an Online Safety Act, which is then to try and control it by the government. But that's another issue. But as far as Musk is concerned, well done for what he's done with X. Well done for what he's done with Tesla. Well done for what he's done with SpaceX. And well done with what he's done with Starlink. I mean, it is phenomenally good what he's done. And okay, he's made phenomenal amounts of money out of it and he's become the richest person in the world. But good luck to him. I mean, for one Musk, there are probably a million people who've had ideas but never managed to put them into practice. But it's incredible, really, that there is one man out there in the whole world who's got these incredible ideas and put them into practice. And well done. All we can say is well done. People hate him, of course, because of his politics, but we've got to look at his achievements, and and they're great. they're great.
Yes, I agree. Sid, we have a go at Ed Miliband every now and again. This is another occasion that we can do the same thing, of course, because we talk about the windmills in the sea and the windmills everywhere. And oh, what's happened now, of course, is that it's coming home to roost in many, many ways because there's tons of windmills planned in the North Sea, the southwest approaches even, that's deeper water. And we've got to be aware of all this and the cost of it. Let's talk about the cost. First of all, the bird strikes. Now, look after our wildlife. The windmills certainly don't. Lots of birds killed, mesmerized by the sound, whatever the reason, they get caught up in this. But the other thing that's coming out now is that shallow water really helps when you've got to build one of these monsters. They're even talking about making barges now to put them on as they get the need for greater wind power, allegedly, comes about. They're putting them on barges. They can't go too deep with these things, so they're floating. But let's concentrate on places like the Dogger Bank. That is a phenomenally rich area for fish, especially the flatfish, because it's all sandy. That's what they like. And certain things like lobsters and crabs, etc. And you can't go in there as a fisherman, it's too dangerous. It's all right, so it's nothing to do with them whirring around your neck. It's the cables that are under the water. You can easily trap your nets. So our fishing industry, again, there'll be nothing left of it, surely, is caught out and they can't go fishing near these things anymore. And they're all in shallow waters, the fish-rich area. And if you take all this and look what wind gives us and the compensation paid when the wind's blowing too much, it's like leaves on the rail track, Sid. And I'm sorry, it's catching up with them.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm fed up with it. The fact that they've banned all drilling in the North Sea for oil and gas, it's just terrible. I mean, Trump came over here, when he came over to Scotland and said, "Oh, you got some wonderful natural resources in the North Sea. That's your future. That's Britain's strength." He's using all these drill. Well, he said when he came before he came into power that his policy would be drill, baby, drill, and he's drilling like crazy in the Mexico Gulf, and he's making America energy independent again, not on the basis of wind power or solar power, but on the basis of oil and gas. And we should be taking advantage of all the oil and gas we can. What you're saying about cables, by the way, should be a planning issue. And one thing this government has been doing is riding roughshod over the whole planning system because they're basically saying, oh, we've got to get houses built, we've got to get windmills built, we've got to get solar farms in place. They're all essentially put in place, and planning is something that we've just got to ride roughshod over to get everything done. And it's wrong, frankly, it's totally wrong. Because, if they apply for windmills and they say, well, we've got to run cables under Dogger Bank, and these cables under Dogger Bank are going to mean people can't fish, then the planning authority should say, well, I'm sorry, you can't do it. Because, fishing is more important than running new windmills. So, at the planning stage, they should just simply got to know if the planning system is working properly. That's what should happen.
We're going to move on to car hire firms. Now, these are really coming to bug people and they really take advantage of people. They've just got off an aeroplane and there's a plethora of these shops that you can get your car from and hire it for a week or 2 weeks or whatever you want. But there is a problem here in that there's lots of small print in the contracts. The famous one, of course, is bringing your car back and, oh, that didn't have a scratch when we hired it to you, and they find one. Now, everybody's sort of trying to get smart, literally, with their smartphones. And if you hire anything at an airport, you go round and take every angle of that car. So you've got proof, dated, etc., that it was in that condition. But that's not sufficient now because AI's come along. An AI scanner can get round a car in detail in seconds and can analyze damage you can't even see with the human eye. And companies are taking advantage of this. Not only are they not being satisfied, they're offering low rates, it appears. Beware of this with special, so let's call them specialized local companies with names you'd never heard from. You've got a situation where they say, "Oh, you've got to have this kind of insurance." Well, no, you haven't. You can take insurance out in the UK, and that covers everything, and you can tell them that, and legally they can't do anything about it. But by the time you've finished paying it, talk about Ryanair giving extras, and that's how they make their money. The car companies, even the big one, even Hertz, dare I say, not in every country, but certain countries have got scanners like this. Have they never heard of wear and tear? Because that's what they're picking up. People have not had a bash or a dent or even a scratch. It's wear and tear. Why can't people be straight, Sid?
Well, I have to confess that what you're saying is something that's new to me. I'm not really aware of these issues, but I think it's always a difficult situation when you hire a car, and because I mean, it's like it's the same actually, funny enough, when you hire a house, because sometimes when you hire a house, it's like you put down a deposit, and when you put down the deposit, and the landlord comes along and and does a check, and and if they're extremely thorough, they can find little scratches and say, "I'm sorry, but you forfeited your deposit because we found some scratches here in the wallpaper or something," and it's very hard then to prove that there aren't any scratches or there's no reason not to refund your deposit. So if you're not careful, you're then going to have lots of court cases. But that's why, frankly, I don't actually like renting at all. I mean, I far prefer to own my own house. I mean, I've spent virtually the whole of my life owning my own house. I've done very little renting. And no, it's worked the other way. I mean, I've rented out, but when I've rented out, I've been very fair with people. I've not sort of, forced people to forfeit deposits. But, you know, this this system of renting and then having a deposit, which, I think, quite frankly, that if you put down a deposit, then you've got to accept that you might lose it, just for no reason at all.
I'll move on to something sinister here, Sid, and it's not hit the British press yet, but it will be shortly. And that is a new law that will come into force next year, the way it's going to be framed and the time scale and everything. And our big brother people in Brussels have come out with control of the media, basically. They've not said this, of course, they frame it in different language. It is supposed to be freedom for the press, but within the law, it is contained that journalists can be detained and intercepted in the public interest, believe it or not. And it goes farther. It says you have to, and this is an anathema to journalists, of course, reveal your sources. Now, that's the whole point of investigative journalists, particularly. No, I'm not revealing my sources. Why should I tell you where I got the information from? The whistleblower, in other words. Well done, the whistleblower. Well done, the journalist, for outing corruption, which is in every country and more in Britain at the moment. Of course, allegedly here in Spain, there's a lot of corruption. There jolly well is. And the last thing that Europe needs is protection for the public. That's how it's framed against these rotten journalists. In other words, they'll be frightened now because of the hate speech that's contained in this new law, because that's what they'll be able to have you, even on a very slender evidential basis. And this is awful. It's just snuck through. And I hope Starmer, who takes on everything now, doesn't follow suit into this.
It's interesting, because what you're describing is increasingly like the communist system, which is prevalent in countries like Russia and China. And we've known for a long time that China is getting more and more influence over the international bodies like the World Health Organization and the United Nations and so on and so forth. And what seems to be happening is that their policies, which are absolutely 100% control of the media, I mean, in China, you can't have an independent journalist. Everything has to be supporting the revolution, supporting the government. If you don't support the government, if you don't support the revolution, then you're going to end up dead, or you're going to end up in total poverty or in prison or whatever. That's the communist system. But we're inching in that direction, and it's been happening bit by bit. And what we're doing now with this Online Safety Act is trying to control what's being said online. What they're trying to do with the media is now increasingly to control journalism. Any journalism they don't like, but what they're doing in this country is they're using Ofcom, so they're using the regulator. And the regulator is saying you're going to lose your license if you allow this to be put on your program or that to be put on your program. And I'm sure that the Christian People's Alliance is actually falling foul of this system because, of course, communism hates Christianity. Communism hates any religion. So we now got, people in the international bodies that want to silence people like us. And that's the reality of it. And that's what we're facing. And it's, all we can do is to be bold and to speak out and to use every channel we've got and to expose what they're doing. That's all we can do.
Can I further go on? In this, if you've not come across it, will amuse you no end. It concerns CCHQ,
Hmm.
which is the governor of the Tory party, and things come out from there. They control the members, or they don't, as they are doing at the moment. There's a leaked memo coming out, and it's all, and I don't know whether you've seen this, but it's flying around social media like mad. It's called Immigrant Perks, and it lists the perks that an immigrant can get: four-star hotel, £50 a week, etc., etc. It goes down. There's about 50 items on this thing, and it's not that it's false. What it says is correct,
Hmm.
but I talk about shooting yourself in the foot because lots of Tory MPs are saying, wait a minute, what did we do about the situation when we were in power? Nothing. And they're literally saying the following. One wag stated, people who put this out, referring to CCHQ, of course, should be put immediately in a detention centre and deported, which is, yeah, the right advice. That's what should be done, perhaps, in the real world to solve the boat situation. But talking politically, the Tories have just not got it together, Sid. Ideal territory for Farage at the moment, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting, you see, because if you look back at the what they call a 14 years Conservative government, which actually was 5 years of coalition government followed by 9 years of Conservative government, that's what actually happened. But during the first 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, it was very difficult for the Conservative Party because everything had to be agreed with the Liberal Democrats. So things were being introduced then, which probably the Conservatives didn't particularly want to introduce. And it was very hard for them to get anything much done. When they were elected in 2015, as a pure Conservative government, you then had a situation where they were obsessed with the EU. I mean, they promised in the 2015 election that we would have an EU referendum, which of course happened in 2016, and that tended to dominate the politics. And because that was dominating the politics, other things weren't getting done. I mean, I've said before, the major criticism was that they never went back to GP fund holding, which worked so well in the 1990s, which the Conservatives should have gone back to because it's far more efficient and you get far more efficient health. And if you get much more efficient health for the same amount of money, then it's obviously better. And people could get GP appointments, which we can't now. Now, so the thing is, you didn't have at any stage, see, because after 2015, after the EU referendum, we then had Theresa May in. And Theresa May was her government never got anything done effectively, and what we're talking about here. And she was Home Secretary for a long time, and as Home Secretary, she never did anything innovative in terms of solving problems. James Cleverly was a complete disaster. He just followed the civil service. He never got anything done. You see, we didn't actually have governments, unfortunately, that were in power that got things done. Boris Johnson may well have done, but his problem, of course, was COVID, because he got elected in 2019 on the platform of get Brexit done, very innovative, conservative leader, but he'd only been in power for a matter of a month or 2 months, and COVID came along, and that then dominated his attention. And of course, because of what happened during COVID, when these parties took place, which which weren't supposed to be allowed, but they were happening in 10 Downing Street. Because of that, he was then forced out of office. We then had the farce of Liz Truss, and then we had Rishi Sunak in, who was basically just following the civil service. He wasn't going to do anything innovative, and he'd only had 2 years anyway. So we didn't really have a conservative government that got to grips with the problems that the nation was facing and solved problems. And instead of that, we had governments, I'm afraid, that just went along with whatever the civil service recommended by and large. And that's why now the Conservative Party is standing back and looking at the situation and saying, do this, do that. And well, why didn't you do it when we're in power? Well, we didn't think, because the civil service told us we couldn't, and we didn't have any prime minister or any ministers that were prepared to say to the civil service, we don't care what you say, this is what we're doing. They were too weak. And that's the reality of it.
Yes, and the other thing that we must pay attention to at the moment, of course, is the lovely Angela and her tirade against Farage. It's either Sir Keir or Angela that's having a real go here. And again, shooting oneself in the foot springs to mind. And of course, it is against as Farage is, the present Data Protection Act in its fullness. He's objecting, quite rightly so. It really infringes on our freedom. But she pulls the rabbit out of the hat, of course, and says, "Oh well, it's restricting women's rights. It's against all women because they're going to risk being raped now." And I mean, this is so excessive. Are they completely bonkers? The public can see through this straight away.
Well, there's two things here. The first is we've got plenty of laws already against rape, against paedophilia, against even the Equality Act. It's what you can say and can't say. We don't need another law in order to mean that nobody's safe. That's the first thing we need to say. The second thing I would say is that this law they're introducing has got a title, which is the Online Safety Act. They're saying it's all about protecting women and children, but that's not their intention at all. What their real intention is to get to grips with anything online that they don't like. And that's what's already happened. So we've already had somebody, an MP, making a speech in the House of Commons about grooming gangs, and under the Online Safety Act, that speech was removed from social media. And there's other examples like that have already happened. So we know it's not all about protecting women and children at all, and they know what they're doing. They're calling it that, and they're making it something else. And in my mind, a parallel is the public space protection orders, because they told us that the public space protection orders were needed in order to protect city centres from people that were drunk and from drug addicts. That's what we were told they were for. But they were actually used against people praying and distributing leaflets outside abortion centres. Now, in my view, they knew all along when the public space protection orders were introduced what they intended to use them for. It wasn't an accident. That's what they intended to use them for. They never intended to use them to protect city centres from drug addicts or from people that were drunk. They knew what they intended to use them for. And it's the same with the Online Safety Act. They're saying it's all about women and children, but it's not. It's about removing things from social media that they don't like, views that they don't like. That's what it's really about. And Nigel Farage is 100% correct. Angela Rayner is just playing a game. She's just saying, oh, no, 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 it's about protecting women and children. You're not going to protect women and children. They're going to be in danger. Nonsense. She's not telling the truth. That's the reality of it.
Thinking along the lines that we were thinking on before about the big summit today, what happened at the last summit? And the press, surprisingly to me anyway, didn't make a lot out of it. But apparently, allegedly, and it came from a good source, Putin actually turned to Trump and said there'd have been no war in 2000 rather than 22 if you'd have been in power. And it's absolutely true, isn't it?
Well, whether Putin said it or not, it is true, yes, but it's only true because Putin had actually said to Trump when he was in power last time that that he wanted Ukraine, and Trump said to Putin, "Well, sorry, you can't have it, because you've got some lovely buildings in Russia, haven't you? And they're going to start getting bombed if you take Ukraine." And of course, Putin never invaded Ukraine when Trump was in the White House. But Biden came in, and Putin could easily see from the very beginning that Biden was extremely weak and he wouldn't do anything. And of course, what happened when Putin first invaded Ukraine was that Biden immediately said, "We can't take on Russia. Russia's got nuclear weapons." And the first thing that Biden said to Zelensky was, "I'll help you to flee." And so, it's we can help you get out of the country, because you can't win this war. So the best thing for you to do is to flee. And that was Biden's approach. So it was only Boris Johnson, by the way, that actually turned around to Zelensky and said, "I'll help you fight. We'll give you weapons. You can't give in to this." That's why Putin was so furious with Britain, with the UK, with Boris Johnson in particular, because he fed Trump the line that oh, if only Zelensky had been willing to stand down and hand over power, then the war would have been over very quickly. Well, that's what Putin wanted. Putin wanted his puppet in place in Ukraine, just the same as he's got in Belarus. I mean, in Belarus, he's got his puppet in power. So the people of Belarus don't have any say. Effectively, they're under the control of Russia. And that's what he wanted in Ukraine. I mean, if Zelensky said, "Oh, yeah, okay, I'll stand down, you can put your puppet in place," it would have been over very quickly. But, that's not what the people of Ukraine wanted. The people of Ukraine want democracy, and they're quite right to fight for democracy. But yeah, of course, if Trump had been in the White House, there's no way that that war would ever have started.
It's fascinating. Literally, as we speak now, we've had news of something that's always been in the background with this conflict, and that is the NATO status. If they were in NATO, they wouldn't have dared come in. Apparently, it's been agreed behind closed doors that there is another formula they can put in, not called NATO, but with clause 5 in, which gives NATO proponents and membership of the ability to go in soldiers on foot into a state that's been occupied temporarily and get rid of those coming in. And that is not exactly a watered down clause 5, but they found another agreement that Putin allegedly can cope with. He's not going to get round the NATO problem anyway. I mean, that's just black and white to him. NATO, that close to him, he doesn't want. But this may be something that can circumvent that.
Yes. Well, you see, I think what's interesting, is that you've got to give Trump credit because before he became president the first time, Obama told Trump that there's going to be a war with North Korea. And Trump basically said, "Okay, I'll take that on board." And he took it on board. He spoke to what he called the little rocket man, had a meeting with him, and he was starstruck. Kim Jong-un was absolutely starstruck as Trump arrived, and he's like, "Oh, let me have a look at your car," and all this sort of stuff. And suddenly, Trump and Kim Jong-un are now friends, and there's going to be no war, there's going to be no battle. Now, I saw some of that with this meeting with Putin, because Putin was actually having a ride in the beast with Trump. And it was almost as though he was sort of shaking hands with Trump, was almost in awe of him. It's very interesting. Trump seems to be able to have this star power, you can only call it, because I mean he is a superstar, Trump. I mean, he was a superstar in his own rights before he became president. And he seems to be able to have this ability to almost get other world leaders to be feeding from his hand and doing what he wants. I mean, it's the same, by the way, with Starmer, because when Starmer first met with Trump, he went with this invitation for a state visit to the UK, which is he's already been on one state visit. Normally, on a second presidency, you don't get a second state visit, but Starmer went with his invitation from the King that Trump could have a second state visit at the UK, and this was to win him over. And he was almost like starstruck in front of Trump. As I've come to with gifts to win you over. And I find it's almost amazing. Now, if I'm right, if that's what happened with Putin, I think Putin is shifting and basically saying, yes, I want peace. I'm willing to make an agreement, and I'm willing to compromise. A red line for him would be that Ukraine cannot join NATO. But if they can find some wording that says, yeah, Ukraine won't join NATO, but it will have some security guarantees. If Putin is now of a mind that, yeah, I want to make a peace agreement because I want this war over, it's gone on for too long, and the Russian economy is been affected. Too many people have died. We've got to bring it to an end. If that's what he's now of a mind to do, that may well be in a form of words that he can agree to. And fantastic, frankly, fantastic.
Right, time has gone again, but we've got a couple, well, one item in particular. 1 million more on benefits since Labour came into power. I think that says absolutely everything. I mean, what is going on? Is it the civil service that's completely incompetent? Is it the government? Well, it's a combination of things, in my opinion. Certainly, the backbenchers are really raising their heads now of the Labour Party, and they're persuading the government to do things from the extreme left that even the present left government wouldn't even consider. And this is why people are not being encouraged or even told, dare one say that, get back to work, we're not paying you.
Yes, I mean, see, what's going on with the economy is that there's a lot of millionaires leaving the country. I mean, they said there were 10,000 millionaires that left the country last year, and that is increasing. I mean, that's just in 1 year, but it's increasing. And the problem is that all these millionaires that are leaving the country run businesses and employ people. And when you're losing millionaires, you're not just losing those individuals, you're also losing a large number of jobs at the same time. And by contrast, we've got 10,000 millionaires leaving the country. We've also got thousands of new immigrants arriving on small boats. Well, the majority of these new immigrants arriving on small boats are going to be on benefits. I mean, they're put on benefits straight away. They're put up in hotels, so they're a great expense to the country. So people that are paying tax and employing people are leaving. People that don't pay any tax and don't work are arriving. That's and at the margin, it's going to have a big effect. It's going to have a big effect on the finances of the country. So it's not surprising we've got a 50 billion black hole, and it's going to have a big effect on the number of people in work because the jobs people employing people have gone. People that are just reliant on benefits and don't employ anybody are arriving. And that's the reality of what's going on under Labour. And they're doing everything wrong, frankly. They're doing everything completely wrong.
Well, let's stick with going wrong before we finally go sit and talk about footy as we do. Beginning of the Premiership this very weekend. Um, I suppose noise is off are more important than noises on the field. I mean, there was the Liverpool thing when they couldn't keep quiet and disrespect a minute's silence. That at least didn't happen at Old Trafford. Perhaps education has got a bit more along the way in Old Trafford. But it was a bit of a mixed bag this weekend, wasn't it?
Well, it's interesting, but if you're talking about, that Liverpool game, they had an example where one of the Bournemouth players was racially abused in the middle of the match, so they had to actually stop the match in order to sort that out. And I believe the police acted very quickly and removed the person that did it from the stands. Um, which that's very, it's very unfortunate. That sort of thing shouldn't be happening, really shouldn't be happening. And
It shouldn't, Sid, but I'll tell you what else shouldn't be happening. The match was, well, held up for 7 minutes. I mean, this should be simply of one of the people in power, and they're watched up and down the terraces these days, usually supplied by the own club, the club indeed. And they should grab hold of somebody like this and exit him, and if necessary, ban him from the ground. It shouldn't hold up a football match for 7 minutes. This is where we are with woke, I suppose.
well, not necessarily. I mean, at the end of the day, the footballer himself obviously heard the comments. It wasn't somebody just shouting something. If it had just been somebody shouting something from the background that none of the players would have heard, but this guy must have got right to the front if the football player himself was hearing these comments and was upset by it. And I think it's perfectly reasonable if someone's been racially abused and they're upset by it, that the match should stop and the person should be removed. But you're quite right that in most situations, it shouldn't come to a point where the player hears it. The people that are making the shouting racial abuse, they should be seen by the stewards and removed without any players being involved. I mean, in most situations, that should be what happens.
Well, it's where we are, Sid, but football goes on despite the change in the format in the BBC there. The pre-season headed up by three ladies indeed, and it wasn't very attractive, but the ladies were, but they didn't get anywhere together with in my opinion, dear old Wayne Rooney, who is a naturally shy bloke, didn't really come up, but give him time.
Well, I mean, I watched the Liverpool Bournemouth game, and it was a really good game, frankly. I mean, it was a very exciting game to watch. Um, but there's so many football games now on television. I mean, really, you can spend your whole time, a whole weekend, or virtually every day now, watching football if you want to. And obviously, I don't want to do that. So it was the only game I watched. I mean, I kept an eye on what was going on. I mean, I was interested in I saw some highlights from the Manchester United Arsenal game because I was interested in that. And obviously Man United played well there, but Arsenal won the game. So it's interesting. But the first game of the season, in my view, is more about how a team plays than it is about the results. So I think it actually augurs well for Manchester United, even though they lost that game, because they played well. So hopefully they can take that, performance onto the future games. But it'd be interesting to see what happens. I really hope that Crystal Palace keep their key players. It'll be tragic if they lose all their best players because they're a team that have been very much, honouring God, and you want to see it continue. You really do. I mean, they did well to get a 0-0 draw with Chelsea. A bit unlucky to have that brilliant free kick from Eze disallowed, but that's football, I guess. But we'll have to wait and see.
That's VAR said ban it completely. We agree to disagree. Bless you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.